Well, good morning again. I'm Leonardo McClarty. I'm the president of the Howard County Chamber, and I'd like to welcome each of you to our August Celerate series. We've got a great topic this morning as we talk about learning the game and how to make strategic decisions in the workplace. And so we've got again, as I mentioned, we've got a great panel discussion. And so with that, I want to first recognize our 2020 annual partners of the Chamber, as well as also recognize our YPN annual partners as well. In particular with YPN, it's Howard Hughes, Dimbo Jones, Davis Agnor, Rappaport and Scowling, and McFarland Insurance Agency. And so again, with the programs that we aim to put on each year, they wouldn't be possible without our annual partners, and certainly want to recognize two of them who are actually, well, three actually, who are joining us on this panel, in Edwards Performance Solutions, as well as also Howard Tech Advisors and the Howard County Economic Development Authority. And certainly MIC is a part of that. And so with that, I am going to actually stop talking and get ready to turn things over to our certainly able-bodied moderator this morning, Eric. Let me see if I say this right. We just talked about it. Eric Levitas. Did I get it right?
Close. That's close enough.
Eric Levitas, who's Director of Business Development with Edwards Performance Solutions, and he's going to introduce our panelists this morning and jump right in. As again, I think all of these people have just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom that they're going to be sharing with us this morning. And so with that, Eric, the screen is yours.
Cool. Appreciate it, Leonardo. How you doing, guys? Very much appreciated for you guys to be here. We are super excited to have a great group of panelists for you guys today. As Leonardo discussed, today's topic is learning the game, how to make strategic decisions in the workforce to progress your career. And we have three people that have done that very well and very strategically throughout their entire life cycle of their career. So I'm going to give just a super high level of who these people are. I'll give them the spotlight to kind of talk a little bit about their background, and then we'll kind of take you guys through their career and how they got to where they are today. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat function or in the question and answer. I'll either take them periodically throughout the conversation, or we'll take it at the end. So first and foremost, we have Stephanie Riley. She is the Director of Market Development for Unum. Chuck Bubeck, he's the Executive Director of the Maryland Innovation Center, and Anata Hajibu, who is the Managing Partner of Howard Tech Advisors. So these are three people I've had the pleasure of speaking to one-on-one. They have an awesome story, and I'm very excited for them to share it with you guys. So what I did want to do is I wanted to give everybody the floor just to talk a little bit about your background, maybe in a 60 to 90 second kind of period. So I'm going to start with Stephanie. You're the first one on my block. If you could just give a little quick backstory of who you are, what you do at Unum, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. So Iowa farm girl at heart, a little bit of a different environment here in Maryland, but I've been here for 12 years, so I certainly like something about it. I work for Unum. We're an employee benefits organization. We have 10,000 employees across the company, and we have about 32 in our local Washington, D.C. field office, which is what I help run. I started out of college with a human resources career and liked what I did there, but wanted something a little bit bigger. And so I started at Unum 12 years ago and have kind of worked my way up since. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity, Eric.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephanie. Chuck, we're gonna jump to you next, if you don't mind giving one of your own.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. You can see that I really don't belong here with my gray hair in the Y part of this, but I'm gonna just offer the other side of it a little bit. My name is Chuck Bubeck. I'm currently the Executive Director of the Maryland Innovation Center, as Eric said. I actually began way back when I was 26 years old and started my first company here, actually in Columbia. I grew up in Columbia, moved here in 1969, and opened up one of the first computer retail stores around 1980 or so. And then I went from there and spent a 10-year career with Apple Computer back right before the Mac was launched, and got involved in that and spent 10 years there in various forms, in the end running basically systems engineering for the East Coast. I then formed Ease Technologies, which was basically a services company. But during that 26-year period, I also started up, funded and started up and spun off 3 or 4 companies, including 2 software companies during that period. And I E-Technologies was acquired late last year by a large managed services provider, and I ended up jumping over to the Maryland Innovation Center because I love working with startups. So I get my my fingers into that and helping the local business community.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Chuck. And then Anata, if you don't mind giving yours, and then we'll get started.
Sure. Thanks again, Eric. I run a IT services company here in Howard County, and we serve small business customers. But this is, I would call it my third career. Right out of school, I worked for a publishing company in sales, and I was there probably for 8 years. And then I joined a enterprise technology company when it was a startup, and I left at about, when we were 1,000 employees or so, and had an 8-year career there. And then I started my own thing, which is local, Howard County based, and there's 3 different seasons of my life, and we'll see what the next season holds for me.
Cool. Well, let's dive in. Let's dive in, Anata, with you. So I know when we spoke about it, you were employee number 7 at that company that ended up going to be more than 1,000 employees and then selling, and here you are today. Talk about the career progression. When you started that company, it was a small company, how you moved your way up that company, and then ultimately when you exited, like what were some of the strategies and what were some of the decisions that you made to be extremely successful in that role in a small company environment?
For me personally, I only like working with small companies. By the time we got to be 1,000 people, it felt very bureaucratic to me. So 1,000 people is a small company for other people. So it really just depends on your personality. When there was only 7 of us, and even 20, 50, 100 people, everyone's individual contribution is so obvious and so critical. And so when you're in a startup, when you're in a small environment, one incremental sale or one incremental relationship makes a major impact, perhaps. So in the venture-funded entrepreneurial startup thing, results are the only thing that matters. And once you produce a little bit of something, your owners or your managers say, hey, can you do the next thing for me? And you can do the next thing for me. So we were a garage startup with 7 people. And when I left, I was vice president of global accounts. And I had a team of people all over the world that were selling to General Electric and Citibank. The largest companies in the whole world were our customers. And it's not that I don't think I did anything special. I just worked the sales pipeline. I did the basic blocking and tackling. And it turned out we had a good product. So you can't produce great results if you have a lame thing to sell. And so there's a whole bunch of things that go together to help people be successful. But within the things I could control, I started early in my career with the selling as a law of averages. The more people I talk to, the more people are going to buy. So in terms of a young person's launching her career, that seems like a very basic tactic that anybody could employ.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I know when we spoke about it, I started my career at UPS, and it's a huge company, and I had to navigate my way through being a number. And I'll kind of pivot here. Chuck, you mentioned you work at Apple, and Stephanie, you work for Unum. They're large companies, and you guys have spent your time in large companies. I'm going to start with you, Chuck. What difference did you have working for a big company, even though maybe Apple was more of a newer company? It was still extremely large at the time, and now obviously one of the largest companies globally. Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about the path that you took and some of the strategies that you decided to implement to progress your career there. And then Stephanie.
Sure. Yeah, sure. When I started at Apple, I was actually employee number 6174, and they did go chronologically. So it was back in the day when you could walk on the Cupertino campus and bump into Steve Jobs as he rode his bike or pulled up in his Mercedes. And so those were the heydays. And one of the things I learned there in 10 years is Apple was really the underdog. If you have to go back in time a little bit and realize that around that time, the IBM PC had come out 1981, in August of 81, and started to change the world. And then the Mac came out and was really, we were messing around with it in 83, but it was launched in 84. And it was an underdog play. And remember, there was no phone, there was no iPad, there was there was none of that stuff. This was a pure tech play. And what I learned there was Apple at the time was very selective in who they were hiring. You're surrounded by these people who ultimately, I think at one point, Apple had the #1 creator of basically entrepreneurs that came out of there over their early 20 years there and all. So I learned a lot there about culture, about teamwork, about working towards one thing. That later on when I started Ease Technologies, that was in '93, I kind of just took that playbook when we first started the company and went with it. And actually something I do share once in a while, Ease Technologies, originally I had plotted that company launch a year before I left Apple, and I needed a way to kind of put an acronym for it, and it was actually ex-Apple Systems Engineers. I never say that really a lot, but that's actually, and then it just fits. So we used Ease Technologies. And at the time when we started, we shifted away from, obviously over the years, shifted away from Apple products and got more into cloud, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the one thing that I learned is, teamwork, culture are things that you can't pick up and wake up one morning. And I think Ananta and I have had this conversation and just say, you know what, I think it's time we had culture, everybody, and get together and have some beers, and now you have culture. It is inbred into the DNA of a company, and you got to start really early. And I found myself gravitating towards companies that can do that. And so when I formed my own, I did the same thing. And when I created spin-off companies, I spun off 2 companies that later off went out and were acquired. One was a stock trading system. The other was a document management system for legal. I put the same kind of culture in there where it was flat. It was a very flat organization, and people felt like they could bring an idea forward. And I won't get into details, but virtually every idea that came out, and some of which I was able to sell for a substantial amount of money, came from within. Somebody had an idea, came in and said, we should try this. And the last example of that probably, and again, Ananta and I have had this conversation back when managed services was first coming on around, and Ananta was there early also. One of my network technicians said, hey, we should stop doing this project work and start doing managed services. In other words, go to our clients and say, hey, why don't you pay us a monthly fee instead of this up and down where we're charging them for services. And he went to the CFO of my organization and he said, no, we're not doing that. But he kept hammering. We ended up implementing it. And then fast forward a while later, we were, I think, one of the major MSPs in the area, including on cloud computing. And that same person now is the vice president of the Mid-Atlantic for the company that acquired us. So he went from network all the way up because he could push, but he was in an organization that allowed pushing.
Yeah, I definitely want to circle back to that too and talk about just from a leadership perspective, all 3 of you. But Stephanie, again, being a worker before you became in a management position, what did it look like? Like, what was it like working for a large company? And what was it like kind of navigating your path to where you are now?
Yeah, and I think everybody's experience is different. And when I worked for human resources, I worked for a nonprofit in upstate New York. So I certainly have kind of that experience to kind of compare and contrast. And I definitely think there's pluses and minuses to working for small organizations versus larger. Larger, I feel like you get more resources. There's more career progression that you have access to. And frankly, there's more funding for career progression and development that you have access to. But to Ananta's point, you can get kind of lost in the crowd in a larger organization unless you yourself figure out a way to stand out in that crowd. And it's kind of funny, Eric, I think initially when I got the email for this, I was like, have I really climbed the ladder? And then I hadn't really thought about it, but I'm like, I guess I have progressed quite a bit through my time in my career. And for me, a lot of it comes back to, as I said before, like kind of that farm girl mentality. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And if I have to get up early to do it, I'm going to do it. And if I have to work late, I'm going to do it. And I think a lot of it for me is work, even if someone isn't watching or doesn't know that you're doing the work, because you know that you're doing it and that you are contributing to the best possible work that you can put out. I actually was speaking to one of our regional vice presidents earlier this week, and I was just asking her about like, hey, how do I make sure that I'm developing my team correctly and giving them opportunities? And she said, well, if you look around you, a lot of the people around you have probably recognized your greatness before you did. And I was like, she's totally right. And so I have been lucky enough that I put my nose down, I put my head down, I met my sales goals, I was creative with the things that I did, and the people around me noticed, and they helped to raise me. So I try very hard with my team to do the same, because that's why I am able to do what I do now. But it really all just comes down, Eric, to I'm a worker bee. I always have been. And if I say I'm going to do something, I'll do it. But I'm also not afraid to go up to somebody and have a conversation that maybe other people wouldn't. And that's something that I probably should like copyright this, but this is something I call the discomfort wall. And we all have it within us. Like it's that little feeling, everyone has it at a different place, but you get it in your gut, you get it in the back of your head, and you get to a place where you're like, I don't want to do this. This is uncomfortable for me. And I would recognize that wall, but I would go through it when I found it. And so I think for development wise, for people who want to continue to rise and find opportunities, recognize when you hit that discomfort wall and make a plan to get through it, because that's where your growth comes from. We always say where pain is where growth occurs, that discomfort wall is where growth occurs. So if you stay on the easy side of it, it's going to take you longer to get where you want to go. So I think I spiraled a little bit, but I hope that got to what you were, Eric.
No, that was wonderful. And I know we talked about that, you are working for a company, and then, I want to talk to Anana and Chuck. You guys have own your own companies. When you have a new employee, whether they're a millennial, whether they're not a millennial, obviously the millennial workforce is a giant chunk of the people coming in and progressing their careers. I guess what I'm looking for now is, as in a leadership position, what kind of environment are you creating? Chuck, you mentioned this Apple environment that you were given these tools that allowed you to be successful. And then you kind of took those tools, ran with it, expanded it, and gave your team every opportunity to ask questions and be a team player. And I want to start with you. You mentioned something to me when we spoke about humbleness and hungriness. Can you speak about that? Like, what if I want to come work for you and I want to kill it, and I want to make a lot of money, have a big title, and support my family? What do I got to do?
Well, that's a whole lot in your question, but I'll try to give it a simple answer. When we're interviewing people, regardless of for what job, the junior person to the senior person, we have three characteristics that we look for, and we stole this from other people. It's nothing original with us. But the first one is that the person's hungry, eager to grow, wants to do more, not satisfied with the status quo. The second one is that person is humble. We touch a lot of technology. We have the ability with one stroke to break a lot of people's technology. And so each man or woman needs to understand what her limitations are and his capacity is. So it takes great humility to be a good team player in our world. And the third one is smart. And we stole this from a gentleman named Patrick Lencioni. But the ideal team player is hungry, he's humble, and he's smart relationally. He knows how to read social cues, or she knows when to not speak versus speak. And that's what it takes foundationally just to get in the front door of Howard Tech, to be a team player. From that, whether a person wants to make a lot of money or wants to be the superstar technology genius of the team, there are all sorts of paths, development, mentorship opportunities. But in our world, we need all three. It's not okay to be both hungry and humble, but that you can't read social cues. Or it's not okay just to be really good with people and hungry, but you have no humility. So there's Lencioni has this whole science around it. We've adopted that full force. And we just find that every time we've had a poor fit employee, it was he or she was not one of those three things.
Yeah. And Stephanie, I wanted to jump to you before I got to Chuck. Can you kind of relate that to that discomfort wall that you're mentioning, and then maybe some of your roots in Iowa? Is like, now that you're in a leadership role and you have this team, what kind of environment are you building for them, whether it be a team environment or just a successful environment? What does that look like now, being in a leadership role?
Sure. I think about a lot of the things that people did to help raise me up, and I try and emulate that. And I try and do it equally. I think that you have to have conversations with your team members about their development. And as painful as it can be, as for us as leaders, if that development means going to a different unit or no longer working for me, but in a different capacity for the company, or frankly, even if it's outside of the company, if it's the right thing for them. I think I'm a very, I'm a feeler. So my team is an extension of my family. And I think that may not always be common in a corporate environment, but we've created the culture at my organization where no matter who you are or what job you do, if somebody needs you, you'll step up for them, and you'll figure out a way to get it done. So during open enrollment season, managers will print off enrollment kits and help stuff them and bring them to the mailbox. Like you have to be able to do what they need when they need you. And so I look a lot to the people from before and what they did to me and the places that they pushed me. So one of the things that took me a while that I really kind of struggled with that other people told me was sometimes you have to allow people to fail, which can be a really hard lesson. But if people don't burn their hands on the stove, they're going to keep coming back and touching the stove and touching the stove. So you can be supportive of people, but you also have to let them develop their own personal growth in a certain way. So I think that balances out with conversations around development. Hey, here are your gaps that I see from you, but here are the things that you do well. And what are your ultimate goals? What do you want to do in the next few years? And I mean, I've seen the meme that everyone has seen now, like everyone who predicted what they were doing in 5 years ago was totally wrong because nobody was able to predict the environment that we're in right now. But what are your professional goals and how can I support you in getting there? And like I said, that can be really hard for me if I have a top sales rep who wants to go into management, or I have somebody who's a great support coordinator and they want to be a sales rep. That can be challenging, but if I want that person to truly grow into what they are able to do, then I should support them in that development. And so I strive pretty hard to be the kind of person that people can have those conversations with. Quite frankly, my supervisor is somebody that I was able to have that conversation with. When I started with Unum 12 years ago, I was an enrollment manager for about 4.5 years. And then I made a personal decision that I needed to slow down. I think I told you guys, I will do it. And if it takes me 24 hours a day, I will do it to make it happen. And so I needed to step back to prioritize starting a family. And I think that that's probably something that folks who listen into YPN events probably struggle with or find themselves in. And so I had to create a situation for myself where I was comfortable going to my boss and saying, hey, I know that I'm doing really well and I've got all this stuff going for me, but I personally need to be able to step back. And because he supported me in that and found me a role that was more supportive for myself that allowed me to start my family, I kind of have that guideline for myself to do the same for my team. And by the way, 4 years later, after I'd started my family and I was kind of starting to look for something else, he came knocking back at my door and said, hey, will you come be one of my managers? So I've had a lot of really good examples and I strive to kind of live up to the opportunities that others have given me.
Wow. Yeah, he sounds like a wonderful boss. And Chuck, I want to, if you don't mind kind of piggybacking off of what Stephanie said, because I remember when we spoke, you almost echoed that and she used that word fail. And I know you and I talked a lot about that and it's scary. But if you don't mind, can you share a little bit about your experience?
No, absolutely. Well, I joke that an entrepreneur without a failure is an entrepreneur in training, because there is, I see smiles from this panel, because I really think that anybody who hasn't had a failure and considers themselves entrepreneurial it's just one day away from it, because until you have, then you test your mettle as somebody who can move forward and learn from those things. That's probably a separate topic, but back to what Stephanie was saying, one of the things, I think one of the changes that happened with this current workforce is, there was a time back then when your success in an organization was determined how fast you moved up through the ranks, right? Which generally culminated in being a manager. When the truth was, not everybody needs to be a manager, and not everybody can has to be judged on the fact that success isn't that, right? Success is being good at what you really want to do and feeling that way in your organization. Now, the good news is that's changed, I think, a lot in the last 10 years or so. But, again, this gray hair will tell you, years ago, that was not what happened. You had to grow up in an organization. And I learned that early on a little bit with Apple. An example, Eric, I think we talked about is I began as a technical person and then grew into a management role. So I was managing technical people, and the instinct from a lot of my peers around the country were they wanted to be the technical leader. In other words, they were smarter than their folks they managed. And the first thing I did was not do that, even though I might have been, to elevate them, that I'm there to help them, not be the big technical guy. And I think that's how I could cultivate some of these people to feel comfortable to grow into the other thing. The other thing is, I got away from the instinct that the gut check with everybody is they feel the pressure that to move forward in an organization, I have to go the next ladder up, which again, I say generally isn't a supervisory role. And we all know that that is just for some people, it's not the right thing. And the failure happens when organizations put them in that role because they're supposed to be there, right? Or they have more tenure, or they seem to get along with everybody, and then they fail. And everybody wonders why they failed. And so the secret there is to, for individuals to figure out where do you want to be good at? And if it's a technical role, that's great. If it's an analyst role, if it's a sales role, that doesn't mean to be successful. And success, by the way, may not mean more money. It may not be a lot of different things. Defining success to yourself can come through an organization that supports you doing what you want to do. I mean, I can always tell when I look around an organization or when I've had them and I look at somebody and I go, they're doing a good job, but that's not what they want to do. And how do I get them to understand what they want to do and tell them that works in the organization, because it's a team and there's a part for that. So that's something I've spent a lot of time on to try to, I do a lot of like figuring out people, and Anand and I have had this conversation too about zeroing in on people and understanding where they're motivated, where they want to go. And one of the things that I've broken away from, which I'm afraid it still exists nowadays, is if you're not ready to, fly up within the organization, that you're basically just, a worker. And that's no such thing in today's, business, particularly small businesses.
Yeah, no, Chuck, I got to tell you, it's like you're in my head, because I was absolutely going to ask you guys next what your definition of success was. And, it's interesting when we spoke, I feel and have lived failure in every way possible. And I'm 28. And sometimes it's like I hit a wall and I go, I don't know where to go. And I've always lived by the mentality. And one of my very, very early on bosses said, fail up. You're going to fail, do it better every time. So I've always lived by that mentality is I'm going to fail. I will continue to fail, but I'm going to fail in the most graceful way possible. That's going to make me better and better and better and better. But I will never stop failing. And I think you guys have all kind of alluded to that, is you are still in a position where you are going to make mistakes, but by making strategic decisions and pivoting and enhancing those decisions are going to make you just more successful. So Chuck, to your point, I want, if you need to elaborate more, what is your definition of winning now that all of you have families, now that all of you are in leadership positions? What does that look like for you? And then same question to everybody else.
For me currently, it's I just love the environment of companies and helping them grow in startups. So I'm surrounded right now in my current role with 30 plus startups all around me in different phases. So to me, I mean, I just love that, because I get to see all the things and share the disasters, the pluses, all those things, and then try to give some, advice and help on things, because every startup or every person new in their career thinks that they're the first one that ran into that. And the truth is, no, it's happened. It may be just a different calendar day, but everybody's had to do those things. So for me, winning for me was being able to get to the point where I could do that and exit out where I didn't have to do it, but I wanted to do it. And so I'm currently, I consider myself the luckiest guy in the world, because I'm working and doing something that I just totally love, and I secretly I shouldn't say it on here, but I have told them I would do it for free, but I don't want to say that because I don't mind getting paid. But
they didn't hear that part.
Good. So that was it. For me, on the other side, winning as growing up, I love teams. My whole thing was figuring out how teams work and how do you get people to operate. And one of the first things I learned, and maybe this dives into a different one, is I never surrounded myself with people like me. I surrounded myself with people who weren't like me and had skills I don't have. And again, I hate to say, Anand and I have had this conversation. I'm a strategy guy. I'm like 2 years out. I am a dreamer and all those things. And if I had 3 dreamers with me, I mean, we'd be sitting around in the backyard somewhere right now doing nothing. And so I've always been sort of careful to surround myself with doers and make sure that whole organization moves forward. And I'll give you a quick analogy that I was thinking about. I'm a car nut, and if you look at cars right now, most cars are all-wheel drive cars right now, right? And especially up in this area, all-wheel drive cars basically shift the power between the front drive and the rear drive automatically. You don't do that. And what it does is the car is going down the road. If they're slipping on the right side, it adjusts so that the back pushes further to stop that. You don't see that happening, but the car moves forward at a great pace. And so I use it as a teamwork example where everybody's pulling a piece of it. If it's seamless, you never saw it. And if you're driving an all-wheel drive car right now, that's happening a couple times every millisecond. There's an adjustment between which drive wheels are moving. And so to me, the complexity of that, not just on the cars, but on the people side, or what can really get a fully functioning, team. And then the secret for everybody on this call is how do I become a good member of that? How do I participate that? And for future leaders, it's how do I incent that to happen and watch for the things that don't work? Because the instinct is to hang around with people who drink the same beer you do, or you're comfortable with, but that's called your outside life, your social life. You can meld the two, but that can also become that's a clique versus a team.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answered your question.
Very much so. So now, same question, what is your definition of success? And I know we chatted about your story of you were living this dream sales life, traveling around the world. And I say dream because that was my dream before I got married, had dogs, had cats. I wanted to travel everywhere. Talk to me about the transition and what your definition of winning then was versus what your definition of winning now is.
So what Eric's referencing is in 2005, I was VP of Global Accounts, and I flew business class all over the world and got to eat sushi in Tokyo and other things I find would be really cool to do. But at that time, my oldest was 7, and my second one was 5 years old, and my daughter was 1. And I was away from home, pushing 3 weeks a month. And I just projected it out, and I'm probably not going to like the outcome of this thing. And so I can't say I was all that smart 15 years ago, but I can say then that I would apply to everyone now is each person has to define, what does good look like? If I reach that particular thing, is that what good would look like? Because if we are on the track of more is what good looks like, then we're never going to be satisfied. So our sales managers always, sell more, right? But at least for this year, we have a quota of that's what good looks like for this year. And so in your business life and your personal life, if you define what good looks like, then you can be working toward something rather than some moving target that constantly changes. So now, 15 years later, my oldest is 22 and my second is 20. My youngest one is 16. And they don't even remember that dad used to travel all the time. And I coached every youth sport, and I had a very, very full, rich time with these kiddos. And so for me, the definition of good was making money, being a leader in the community, having an impact, and my family is healthy, relationally connected. So, if you munch all that together, to me, 15 years ago, that's what good looks like in 2020. So it doesn't matter how old you are, if you're 25 or 55, if you create a definition. And I'll leave you one quick acronym, Eric. When I coached youth football for years, someone told me that a good definition of win, and so I brainwashed little boys with this, was work hard, improve, and never quit. And so that transcends youth football or business or whatever. If we do those things, we can win, but you have to define that for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And Stephanie, before I jump to you, it's interesting. And I don't think I shared this with you guys. Again, I'm 28, I'm very young in my career, but the thing that has made me motivated and has gotten my definition of success, I always thought was money. I always thought was fame, success, nice cars, nice house. And then I remember when I was 13, my mom got diagnosed with cancer. My dad had a mild possible heart attack. And I'm like, man, if they could survive almost death, I could be a good, hardworking person. And I've always accredited my success and my mentality to my parents gave everything for me. And now I'm in a position to now have a beautiful wife and hopefully children soon. I want to provide that to them. And I say, hey, what about my team members? What about my workers? I want to give them that environment as well. And, success to me is just being healthy and being happy. And I know, I'm very positive that that's what Stephanie is going to talk about and I want to pass it to her. But you all three kind of embody, what it's like to be a personal and professional leader in the community. So I wanted to share that because I did have the pleasure of speaking all of you. But Stephanie, do you mind just kind of piggybacking on that? Like, what you're a mother now, what has changed and what is your definition of success maybe then versus now?
Yeah, there's definitely a shift in the definition when you have these little people that rely on you for literally everything. And I remember when I was interviewing for this management position, I was very brutally honest with my interviewers, which was, I'm going to still be a mom, and that's still my number one priority. And even if I get this job, it will still be my number one priority. And so I had to come to a place where I was comfortable having that conversation. And I think, other opportunities had presented themselves to me before this specific management opportunity had come up. And you have to be a little selfish with yourself about like, what really are my priorities? Is it, do I need to get my income to a certain level? Is it that I want to be able to make my kids dinner every night and see them in the morning before I leave for work? And you really have to identify what that is. And a lot of times that'll be in conflict with the person you were before you had kids, because I was the person in the office first and the person who left at the end of the day, and people would bring me lunch because they're like, have you ate yet today? It's a totally different feeling to be this person who says, hey, I'm going to do this job and I'm going to do it great for you, but I got to leave at 4:30 every day to get my kids from daycare. And if that doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for me. So that can be a hard place to come from. But for me, when I think of winning, it's being able to lead a team in a way where they know that I am personally invested in their success and I want to see them grow. I want to see them be financially successful and start families and be able to do things because they're good at their job. But I also think there's a really big element, and this has come up a few times. If you don't actually believe in the work you're doing, or you don't actually enjoy what you're doing, it's going to show in the work that you do, and the people around you are going to be able to tell. So think about, like, if you've ever been into one of those retail stores where they immediately come up to you because they're mandated to greet you when you come in the front door, most of them don't like their job. And I think that spreads in a business environment. You can tell if somebody is really just doing it to go through the motions. And so my goal is to continue to do work that I think is meaningful for people, support my team in being able to be successful and grow personally and professionally. And, it's one of the things that really surprised me is that I have a lot of conversations with my team members that are not work related. It's, hey, I've got this personal issue going on and I'm not really sure how to handle it. Or it's, I'm pregnant and I'm afraid to tell you because I had a bad career experience with another employer. And so being a place where my team has a safe place, but also I'm going to develop them. So I'm not going to be soft on them, but I'm going to help them become better versions of themselves personally and professionally. So I connect my success now to both them, my team at work, and my team at home. And we talk about balance. I don't really think that balance is ever really possible. You're always going to be pulled a little bit more in another direction, but just being aware of, hey, where are my priorities? What am I doing? I take my vacation time. Unum gives me generous vacation time and I take it because that's important to me, and setting the right example. So I'm keenly aware that I have other younger females looking up to me in my office, and they look at me and say, she can be a manager with small children and still do her job. And so I know that I'm setting an example for them. And so I try to be very transparent. I don't ask my team for perfection. I ask them for transparency. So if you've done something you don't feel good about or that needs fixing, I totally get it. You're not going to be perfect, but let's talk about it and be honest and figure out what solution we can come up with to resolve whatever that was. And I try to be the very same myself. I don't pretend that I don't have kids upstairs riding their scooter right now. Like, this is my life. And I want them to have a realistic picture of what that looks like so that they don't have these kind of starry-eyed visions of, oh, what it looks like to be a manager in a Fortune 500 company. And you just, you happen to make it all work and it's all perfect. It's not all perfect. And I think we do our team a disservice if we show them that it is. We live real messy lives, and that's what it is. But if we can support our teams to be able to be the best versions of themselves at home and at work, then that's us doing our best work.
Yeah, I think, and I love that. I think it's a great way to end the discussion with another question that directly relates to what you were saying, Stephanie. Is you're in a position where you're a mentor. Whether you like it or not, you have you're honest with these people. You're talking about your lives with these people. You're making strategic decisions with these people. So I wanted to go through the three of you, and again, it's a hair loaded, but who was your mentor, if anybody was? How did you pick them? What was it like? And then now you being in that mentor role, what is it like being that mentor, and how does someone come up and either ask for it, or how do you pick someone to mentor? So Nana, if I could start with you, can you share just what mentorship is like in your world?
Sure. Thanks. That's a great question. In each of the quote three careers that I've had, for me personally, it just started with men that I wanted to model my life after. So before I ask a person to be my mentor, I need to admire, respect, believe that he or she can pour value into me. And so there've been a couple of times where I've had, more traditional formal mentors, but absent that, I've had dozens of role models. I want to be like her when I grow up. I want to be like him when I grow up. And so this construct does not need to be formal. It can be very, very informal. So men and women, I would just ask them questions. Hey, how are you doing this? And can you tell me about your career path there? Within our company, we're really trying hard to memorialize some formality in mentorship and coaching. But to Stephanie's point earlier, I feel like authenticity and transparency is the best mentorship I can provide to any of the guys and gals on our team. Meaning, recently, my wife and I are going through some very complicated issues with one of our kids, and people are asking me, how's it going? I'm like, oh, we're having a really hard time today. And it's not a big deal, and to me, I'm pouring into people by being transparent and authentic. So I would love to have a structured mentorship thing on a schedule, and this is what we're trying to accomplish and all that kind of stuff. But oftentimes people learn more by watching you than they do by listening to you talk.
Yeah, I love that. Chuck, how about you?
I'm a huge fan of mentoring, and that, currently in the Innovation Center, that's what drives a lot of work with the startups. For me, probably originally was my father. My father was a technical inventor working for the government. And so when I was very young, he would have a lab down the basement building little prototypes of things that later ended up on somewhere. He worked for NSA. And I started to, realize that what he was doing is solving problems, and he loved doing that. And I wanted to kind of be a problem solver. So that part was there. To be honest with you, I hate to keep coming back with it, but the early people I worked with at Apple, I learned so much from them because they were sort of like not bound by anything. There was no bounds in this huge company where it was about just conquering the world, which was ridiculous. Some people look at Apple and look at Steve Jobs and go, what this guy, what was he trying to do? Well, I got news yesterday. As any of you saw, they hit 2 trillion in market cap, first U.S. company ever to do that. And that was based on this sort of like, let's figure out the way to do things. And, not to pick and use Jobs too much, because I guess you're guessing that I did take a lot from what he did. But, his thing was sometimes people don't know what they want. That's how the iPod came about. People didn't know they actually wanted music like that. So he showed it to them. He didn't wait till there was some market analysis that decided that was the way to go. So I love that part, which I try to then take in. And then the other part of mentoring that I'm finding, because I'm mentoring some senior companies now and some startups, and sometimes sharing your story is the best thing, because everybody thinks that I'm the first person that had this problem. And then when they talk to somebody else, a mentor, that realizes, no, it's happened before. And, again, the calendar may have changed, but the same problem is, yeah, you had to put it on your credit card to start this thing up, and you had to go through this. Yep. And that's just the way it goes. And here's some things that maybe can help you. So the value of mentoring is immense. And I've at the Maryland Innovation Center, that's what we spend a lot of time on. We cultivated a whole bunch of mentors who want to work with people. And a little pitch for where we are right now in Central Maryland in this county. We have got a rich array of people. And for those that don't know, this is probably, as far as innovation, probably the second most innovative region in the country if you want to count Silicon Valley still as having that. And it's because we've got a lot of successful people, a lot of which you'll be surprised want to give back. I mean, I'm shocked at the amount. When I came into this role in November, I realized that we just didn't have enough. And just reaching out from my contacts in the county, there are so many people who are successful and they're kind of on the sidelines, and most of them want to help. They don't want to be paid. They just want to see people go. And that is the greatest thing. And every example I have of successful startups that moved along was they had great mentoring. They had somebody mentoring along with them. And I love that environment. And the more we create that environment, I think is the success to the region to grow, to grow and create these next, innovators, really.
That's wonderful. And Stephanie, do you want to finish it off, give your take on it, and then we'll open it up for questions. I see we have one right now. And then if anybody has any more questions, please put it either in the chat box or the question and answer. So Stephanie?
Sure. So I think, and this was mentioned, I think Chuck mentioned it, I've had formal mentors in the past, but for me, really the more valuable ones are the ones that I've formed some sort of personal relationship with and have been that type of mentor for me. I was in a situation once where I was assigned a formal mentor and it really wasn't working for me. And instead I went to other people who were in the same position, but in a different unit essentially, and found people who believed in my abilities and the things that I was able to do. And I created a mentorship, an informal one that was more beneficial for me. So I think sometimes people, you feel the pressure to like, I need to find a mentor. This person looks great. I'm going to walk up and be like, can you be my mentor? A mentor is so much more than somebody you have a phone call with half an hour once a quarter. It really has to be somebody that's invested in you personally and sees maybe a little bit more in yourself than you see in yourself. But for me, that's been super key. When I think about the people who have been key to helping me like build my confidence and move along and be those informal mentors, they're the people who believed in me probably a little bit more than I believed in myself, but I had given them reasons to do that. So I think there's a lot of value in former mentorship, especially if it's like you're at a company that allows you, give you the access to an executive or somebody different that you would never have access to. I think that that's tremendously beneficial. But I have found that personal relationship mentors, people who really notice me and believe in me, are the ones that have been the ones that have helped me rise more than others.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Now, and I believe you guys have had the experience again of being in the environment where you're being mentored and now being the mentee of others. And again, speaking to you guys all single-handedly, I think what you guys are doing is amazing. And I super appreciate you guys just giving back to the community, running amazing businesses, and just being awesome people. So that kind of concludes my rigorous Q&A with you guys. So we have opened it up. Right now we've got 3 questions. I want to start with the one we have from someone anonymous. They said, how do you deal with workplace politics? I honestly feel like being honest hurts people's views of me, but I don't want to lie and appease. So if anybody wants to answer that, I'll open it up to the group, take it from there. And then we do have 2 or 3 others right now. That
I could take a stab. I did see that. I'll do a quick one, but Stephanie looks like she was about to, so I'll make it quick. For me, I'm into the whole really zeroing in on how you solve it thing. And some of the times the best ways you can get your point across is to show it indirectly. In other words, you don't need to sometimes confront somebody, but create an environment where they find that out themselves. In other words, if you want to complain about something, maybe bring a solution that kind of starts the conversation about the problem without having to say, this sucks or something. I mean, I always had a motto where if you want to bring in a problem, you got to bring in the solution too. I'm not interested in hearing a problem. That was my first thing. And I learned that a long time ago. And that's what I have. And, if it comes to me now, they already know that, and I will go to somebody else with a problem and a type of solution. So I guess back to that question, to get around politics, find the other way around it. In other words, you want to solve something. Sometimes the direct method's the best, but if you spend your whole time directly telling people how you don't like stuff, there could potentially be blowback. And most people learn better when it comes around sort of sideways a little bit.
Stephanie?
Yeah, I think there is a point there. You do have to play the game a little bit, but I would say always be true to yourself. Don't be somebody that you aren't. People can tell when it isn't genuine, and also never lie. Like I've always found that people who bend to the truth, like I always thought like that's much harder than actually telling the truth, because then you have to remember the lie that you told and the person that you told it to. So figure out what's genuine to you and just be true to you. So if something is going on that you're uncomfortable with, or that it hasn't, it's not something you feel like you should have had access to something, really look at like, how can I objectively look at the situation? Who can I talk to about this? And if it's about like, hey, this person got the role instead of me, did you ask for the role? Did you ask for opportunities? Did you make connections with people? Did you push through that discomfort wall to get to that point so that you could have those conversations? So I would say be true to yourself, but also you can't hide behind what's comfortable for you because you won't grow.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to jump because we have a bunch. You talked some about the importance of failure. How do I know I've failed enough to reach the level of testedness that you're referring to? That is from Zachary Cochran.
Zachary, I'll take that one for you. And I don't think you know, because every season of my life, I've gotten punched in the mouth a different way and a different angle. And sometimes it's in the gut, sometimes it's in the eye. And so my hope is by the time the next obstacle comes, so I'm 55, my mom is 80. I'm not even yet prepared for the fact that she's going to get older and older, and I'll have to be caring for her in her senior days. I have a son with disabilities, Zachary, Samuel, and I don't know what the future looks like for him. So I don't know that there'll ever be an answer when I'm, quote, tough enough or tested enough or whatever. But the incremental failures, the incremental challenges that you've overcome by the time you're 30, by the time you're 40, by the time you're 50, it's probably going to prepare you by the time you get the next punch at 60.
Yeah, to pick up on that, one of the other things I always find is failure is okay as long as you don't repeat the same one. And that's where people get themselves into not realizing. So I think failure is along the line, and Ananta's right, all the way along. The difference is, do you learn from that one? And then if you go back and notice the same one is showing up as a failure, you got a bigger problem. So I think, you don't want to say failures are sort of badges of honor, but in a way, failures that you've successfully come from, I think, move you so far ahead. And like I started off when I said, I think somebody without a failure, they're a failure in waiting. It's coming, and you'll never be tested till you throw the towel in or take that and pivot, skyrocket off that, but don't repeat it. Every time failures were brought into whatever we were doing, I just said to myself, I never want to keep this one. I got to learn from it, never go this one again. And then I'll be cool with the rest of the failures.
Yeah. I'll tell you, before I jump to the next question, it is super corny, but I don't know if you guys have ever seen Matthew McConaughey talk about success. And he says, I'm always chasing the better version of me, and I'm never catching them. So I'm always chasing it. Once I think I get there, he's already 10 steps ahead of me. So I'm chasing him some more. And I watched that one day and I was like, all right, Matthew McConaughey, we're gonna run by that mentality ourselves. So I've been living by that mentality as well. So
was he standing next to a Lincoln by a beach, kind of like looking lost?
I think so. I think he was in a Lincoln. I think that, yeah. So let me jump to Kelsey. It looks like she has 2, and then we have 1 more, and I know we have a few more minutes left. So she said, were there any influences or pivotal moments that changed your direction? And then she also said, what are the day-to-day goals should you set to grow our presence in an organization? So you guys could take one or the other one. So who were influences in your life? And then what are the goals that you should set every day to make sure that you're progressing in your career?
I'll just provide like a little snippet on the second question, which is, I think it's easy to get stuck in the day-to-day and not think about the bigger picture. I think you've got to kind of set some sort of frequency for yourself that you're going to step back and reassess. Am I doing the things that I want to do to get where I want to be? Because if you're the type of person who works really hard and is in the work that you're doing, we don't necessarily step back to look at our wins and the places that we failed to learn from them. I would say we look at our fails more than we look at our wins. And that's just the nature of kind of, at least the environment that I'm in a sales culture. So you've got to be able to take time for yourself to figure out where you're going and reassess what your goals look like. So whether that's daily, monthly, weekly, you've got to be a little selfish with your own personal development and look back and figure out, am I working towards where I want to be?
I could jump on this second, I guess the first one, influences or pivotal moments. And I think Ananta will agree with me on this one. One of the things, and certainly in Ananta and I's business, was the goal is always more customers. more revenue, more customers, and you spend your whole time doing that until you get mature enough to realize that that's not always the game. And a pivotal moment that companies can make is also look at the customers and realize that maybe some of those customers aren't good customers for you, and making the hard decision. And both Anant and I have had this conversation about, making those kind of moves where you actually say, I might have to give up this revenue because it doesn't fit where the goal of the company is, or our goals are. And those sometimes can be pivotal moments, because a lot of failed companies in our business are from companies that will go to just get business, and then they realize that they don't have business. What they've got is they're throwing services around or technology around, and having the sort of ability to kind of stop and say, I'm willing to actually drop revenue because I know I'm actually going to do better, because I'm not going to get into this is a whole nother topic, because it's not about sales, it's about profit. I mean, that's a whole nother conversation, but in the end, for any company, that's what it's about. And the sooner you recognize that, the faster you're able to build value for yourself and your organization. So that may not be a pivotal moment, but I know it's one Anant and I have spent a lot of time, over the years talking about.
Yeah, I'll toss onto that one briefly. In terms of influences, at least my first two careers, I saw people that I admired that I didn't want to be like them anymore when I grew up. The cost that the work had put on their lives personally, their family, and all that kind of stuff. And so those were pivotal moments just by watching the environment around me. And there's always going to be external influences that today you can't predict. The way that my father died changed the direction of my career at one particular time. The priorities that I valued changed as I grew over time. And the raising of my family obviously wasn't there 10 years earlier. And so these external influences are going to come along. And if you're a young married fellow like you, Eric, and you already know what it's going to be like, 3 years, 5 years, I hope to have a child or two. If you're a young married person, you should know now that 10 years from now, you and your spouse are going to have conflict, because that's just the way it works. And if you're single and you desire to get married, you should know right now that things are going to change. So even today, no matter what stage we're in, we could look 3, 5, 10 years out, and we can say, there's going to be some influences, there's going to be some transition points. How would I navigate that knowing what I know now? Or is there an older person that could speak into me and give me some perspective on what I might want to expect down the road?
No, that's wonderful. We have one more before the time is up, and then I'm going to pass it back to Leonardo and the Howard County team. It looks like the question is, a lot of young professionals work for large companies. What can we do to stand out? And I very much relate to that. Again, I worked for UPS for many years. You are a number, and I'm intrigued to hear what you guys have to say very briefly on what is it going to take for someone to stand out when they're a number.
I'll just sum it real quick for me. So the first would be curious about areas outside of your department and make connections to learn more. The more connections that you make, the more opportunities that will be created for you. I would also say a lot of companies have leadership programs or development programs. Look for them, ask to be included in them, take the opportunity to be included in them. And then I'll just loop it back to what I said in the beginning. A lot of times you need to work when people aren't seeing you work. You need to be an independent worker when someone isn't looking over your shoulder to be able to show what you're able to do. So those would probably be my 3 tips.
Love that.
I'll pick up next. I would say be a risk taker, because that's how you can stand out. Nobody in a large organization will look and say, Joe's a good guy, but that guy keeps bringing up ideas and trying these things. What an idiot. That doesn't happen. So being a risk taker can maybe help you slowly stand out. And by risk taking means calculated risk. That doesn't mean, let's put in 10 water fountains on the floor. It means thinking and understanding the business enough to say and bring an idea forward and have the capability to sell above you that concept, because that'll let you rise. I don't care if you're a company of 100,000, if you go back through those companies, the best ideas started down deep within the organization. And the only ones that bubbled up were people that were willing to take the risk.
Yeah. Nada, you want to finish it up?
Yeah, I'll just toss out that no matter what business you do it well. Be a producer of results. If you're an accountant, do some kick butt tax returns. Or if you're an engineer, make your drawings like the best drawings and be thoughtful, business oriented, all that kind of stuff. And obviously, if you're a salesperson, produce. Nothing speaks louder in the business world, small company, large company, than results. And he or she who gets results gets noticed, and he or she who gets noticed moves up the ladder.
Yeah. Wonderful, guys. So I very much appreciate all three of you. You all know you're rock stars. I don't need to tell you that. I very much appreciated this conversation. I believe that you guys are doing what is needed to be done in the community. And I'm just glad that people like you exist here locally to help out the young professionals here. So thank you guys, very much appreciate it. I'm going to pass it back to you, Leonardo and Taylor. And thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me moderate you guys.
Good job, Eric, by the way. Nice job of moderating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Again, great job. And thank you, Stephanie, Chuck, and Ananta for sharing. And as well as all of you for joining us this morning. Just a few takeaways that ultimately, I think, to sum up the last 45 minutes, some I'll put in my words. I think what you heard was certainly being able to distinguish between what I would call the soft skills and the technical skills, because that was discussed throughout. And the technical skills are certainly very easy to quantify. I think as Anana made it plainly stated, it's either you produce or you don't. And it's really easy to measure. I think the soft skills are some of those things that Stephanie certainly touched on that really speak to those things that you will accept and maybe those things that you won't accept, whether that's from yourself or from other people around you. I think the second thing is in terms of continue to learn from each season. And I'll use this quick example. If you're in your 60s right now, then you went through the recession of the 80s, and that taught you something. Then when you got to the recession of around 2007, 2008, 2009, you were able to draw on that experience from the 80s. And then now that you're in COVID, you've got experience to draw on from 2008 and from the 80s. And certainly COVID is still teaching us a number of new things as well. But with each challenge, continue to draw on that previous experience. And I think that's one of the things that life teaches us, is that each experience is teaching us something to get us prepared for something else that's down the road that maybe is unforeseen. And then the last thing is, I would say, listen with both your eyes and your ears. Certainly, you have to hear what's being said, but also pay attention with your eyes. And I think that was something, again, that Stephanie touched on, and Ananta spoke to it as well as Chuck. Again, a company may say something, but also pay attention to what they do. And so with that, thank all of you. Thank you to our annual partners, both for the overall chamber as well as specifically for YPN. Encourage you to continue to review upcoming events. In particular, a couple that I will just touch on. YPN's virtual mixer will be on September 9th, and we'll be partnering with Treble Network. And so we'll be able to come back and really get back into doing some networking there, and certainly visit the rest of the chamber website to see what else we have going on. Again, thank you all for coming, and have a great rest of your day.